Today, I'm going to teach you how to win big money playing 7-card stud. All right, welcome back to the channel. I'm 2 Commas, and today we're going to be talking about 7-card stud. If you don't know, I am a former director of poker operations at a major Las Vegas casino. I've played thousands of mixed game poker hands, and I've won tens of thousands of dollars, as well as made some final tables playing mixed games. I absolutely love them, and that's why we're going to be talking about 7-card stud today. Hopefully you're going to get a lot of value out of this video. So let's go ahead and assume that you will. So do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, hit the alert button so you don't miss any future content. And let's go ahead and dive into 7-card stud. So why 7-card stud? First, 7-card stud because it's actually one of the more classic poker games. I know everyone plays Texas Hold'em now, and it's very popular. And you see a lot more people playing PLO and Omaha as well. But 7-card stud was actually the game that was played the most back in the day. It's still popular on the East Coast to some degree, and it can be a lot of fun. Another reason why you want to learn how to play 7-card stud is because it is a mainstay in the mixed poker game H.O.R.S.E. So you don't really play H.O.R.S.E in cash that much, but you do play H.O.R.S.E in tournaments. And so if you're going to play the H.O.R.S.E tournament at the World Series of Poker or any other tournament series that's being offered, you have to know how to play 7-card stud. You need to know how to play stud format games in general. So 7-card stud 8 or better, Razz. And then if you're going to be playing in some cash games, they'll often mix a stud format game in with another game. So you might have a 7-card stud Badoogie, or you might have a triple stud tournament where you're going to be playing all three of those back to back to back. So it really is a lot of fun. And if you can get good at it, you can make a lot of money. So let's go ahead and dive in. So what do we mean when we say stud? Stud is a particular format of playing poker and how the cards are dealt and how the betting action takes place. So you have three main forms of poker. You have flop games such as Omaha and Texas Hold'em, which most people know. In those games, you are dealt whole cards, which only you have, sharing community cards, which are placed in the middle of the table, which your opponents share with you. In draw games, there are no community cards. All of your cards are concealed and they only belong to you. And you turn over the best hand at the end and see who wins. In stud games, it's a different format in which there are no community cards, but you do have exposed cards. So in stud, 7-card stud in particular, you're going to be dealt 2 cards face down, which are your whole cards that no one else can see. And then you're going to be dealt 1 card face up, which is your door card or 3rd street. And everyone can see those cards. So that's a major difference in how stud games are played compared to draw games and to flop games, in that you have exposed cards that everyone can see. And ultimately, you're going to be dealt 7 cards in which your first 2 are down, 4 are up, and then your 7th street or your last card is also dealt down. Stud is also a limit game. So as we discussed in previous mixed game videos, such as Deuce to 7 triple draw, you're going to be playing a limit format. Most of the time, mixed games are played in a limit format. I happen to really like limit games because it really limits your exposure to losing all of your money in one hand. But if you're not careful, you will lose a lot of money over time, and that's why you have to get good at playing these games. So 7-card stud is also different because you have a limit structure of betting, but you have an extra street of betting. So you have an extra opportunity to bet and possibly win money and hopefully not lose money. So what do I mean by that? Remember, you're going to be dealt 2 cards down, 1 card up. So that's all dealt at one time. That puts you on 3rd street where the betting starts. If you're playing 20-40, then your bet is going to be in increments of $20 starting on 3rd Street, and your raises are going to be in increments of $20. So that continues on 4th Street, where you're still betting in $20 increments. And then at 5th Street, so your 5th card dealt, the price of poker goes up, it doubles, so you're now playing at $40. And that's going to continue on 6th Street and on 7th Street. So there are 5 streets of betting that take place in 7-card stud. If you're playing 100, 200, same principle applies. If you're playing $8, $16, same principle applies. Now, one thing that's also different in stud games is there is no button. It is an ante game, so there's no blinds. So everyone puts in money in order to be dealt cards. That's your ante. Normally in a stud game, the ante is going to be a nominal amount compared to the small bet. So let's say you're playing 20-40. The bring in would normally be $10 or could be $5, but I think it's normally half of the small bet in most scenarios. So your bring in is 10. Your ante may be a $5 ante, right? So if you're playing 20-40, you may have a $5 ante. Everyone who wants cards has to put their ante in. Once the cards are dealt, you are going to look at the door cards to see who acts first. So unlike button games where the first to act is after the big blind, in a stud game, the first to act is going to be the person with the lowest card. And cards are by suit. So clubs, diamonds, hearts, spades, it's in alphabetical order. So the deuce of clubs would be the lowest card. If anyone has the deuce of clubs or low cards like that, whatever the lowest card is going to be the person who puts money in the pot forcibly first. So let's say you do have the deuce of clubs, then you will be putting that $10 in, and that is called the bring in. You do have the option of what is called completing the bet or making it the full small blind bet of $20 off the bat. For the purposes of this video and anytime you are playing stud going forward, don't ever do that. Don't ever bring it in for the full complete bet. There is almost no advantage to it, and I could go into detail why, but just trust me, don't ever bring it in for the complete. Then the next person who wants to play has the option of either calling the bring in bet, so that $10 bet, or completing the bet and making it a full $20. Almost always, the person who voluntarily puts money in the pot is going to complete the bet. So if you are the person who is going to be first to enter the pot after the bring in comes in, complete the bet, okay? Don't ever just call the bring in, complete the bet. The other thing that's interesting about 7-card stud and stud in general, which I like, is it's a lot more flexible and board dependent. What do I mean by that? Well, if you're playing Hold'em, which most people know how to play Hold'em, we know that aces are a good hand. We know that kings are a good starting hand. We know that ace king is a good starting hand. And therefore, you raise and you act accordingly, and it becomes a bit predictable to some degree. But in stud and 7-card stud, it's a lot more dependent on what cards are showing and what cards are dead. And by dead, we mean since you don't share these cards, once they've been exposed and folded, that means they are dead cards. Since that changes all the time, strong hands tend to change in 7-card stud, and it makes it a lot more dynamic and a lot more fun. So let me give you an example. In Texas Hold'em, if you had pocket aces and you were up against a lower pair, let's say kings, you're going to be an 80% favorite to win that hand. But in 7-card stud, hands are a lot more vulnerable because equities run closer together. And so if you had in 7-card stud, let's say you had ace, ace, 8, and you were up against king, king, 8, right? So let's keep the 8 the same. So ace, 8, 8 versus king, king, 8. Then you're only a 66% favorite in 7-card stud. And that's because The equities run closer because you are a lot more vulnerable to your opponent catching a second pair and therefore have two pair and you'll only have one pair. Whereas in Hold'em, it's more likely that the second pair is coming on the board and therefore you and your opponent share that hand. And that's why equities run closer in stud games and your hands are more vulnerable. It is probably worth it to try to chase your hand in 7-card stud, assuming your cards are still live. Because the equities run closer, there are many more chances for you to actually catch the cards you need and win the hand. So that's an important thing to notice when you're playing 7-card stud. Because equities run close, you should be trying to steal as many pots as possible on 3rd Street. What do I mean by that? I mean that if you have the highest card showing and you are also late in the action, you should be raising and trying to steal the pot with the antes as early as possible so that you don't get run down. It actually doesn't matter as much if you have good hole cards. If you have an ace up and there are no other aces showing, then it's definitely worth putting in a raise to represent a pair of aces at the least. So because equities run so close in stud, you need to pay attention to the dead cards and live cards. And in order to do this, you need to pay attention when the cards are first dealt on 3rd Street, because if someone is going to stay in the hand, you'll have a longer opportunity to look at their cards, the ones that are exposed. But if someone folds, they're going to turn their cards over and they're going to give them back to the dealer, and you will no longer have an opportunity to see those cards. So you need to pay attention and don't be in a hurry when the cards are first dealt. So let's go over an example. Let's say that the cards are dealt and ahead of you is dealt a 5 up. You're dealt, let's say, a 10 up, and let's say you have a queen 10 in the hole. So you have 10s split. Let's also say you have behind you a jack up, a 9 up, a king up, and another 10 up. So the first thing you need to do is you need to pay attention to the cards that are exposed. The 5, your 10, the jack, the 9, the king, and the 10 again. And you need to determine whether or not it's worth moving forward in the hand. Now, in this particular situation, you're going to be second to act. And the reason why is because the 5 is going to be the bring in. They're the lowest card, and therefore they have to put money in the pot first. So you're going to have to make a decision on whether or not you should play with your split 10s. So these are some terms you might want to be familiar with. If you have a pair that is split, meaning one card showing and one card buried, like your 10s, that's called split 10s. If you had two 10s that were both buried and people weren't able to see them, that would be called wired 10s. And if you happen to have 3 10s, that would be called being rolled up, and you should be trying to bet your house on that particular hand. But in this case, you have a 10 up, a queen, and a 10 down. So now you need to look at the cards that are going to be being played behind you. So you have a jack, a 9, a king, and a 10. So should you play this hand? I wouldn't, and here's why. The first reason why is because another 10 is gone. So regardless of whether or not that person plays, another card you need in order to make trick 10s is gone. So now there's only one 10 left in the deck. A second reason why I wouldn't play this hand is because there's a king, which is higher than your pair of 10s. So if that opponent has a king in the hole, then you are a real dog to win the hand. And then a third reason is because a potential hand you could make would be a straight if you had a jack, a 9, or a king. Well, jack and 9 and king are all taken in this example, so you don't have the cards you need really in order to make the straight, another pair, or to even beat the king if the king had a pair. So this is a hand that I would fold, and this is completely based on the board texture. So let's take a look at another example. Let's change the up cards that were dealt. So let's say there's still a 5 in front of you. You still have the 10, queen, 10. But let's say behind you now is a 5, a 6, another 6, and another queen. So would you play this hand? I likely would play this hand for several reasons. One, my 10 is the second highest card. So it's unlikely that someone is going to have a pair that is bigger than mine, because the 5s and 6s are taking each other's cards. So there's not a chance really for them to be rolled up. And then the queen could have a pair of queens, but you have one of the queens. So it's also less likely that the individual with the queen is going to have a pair of queens and thus be higher than your 10s. So in this particular example, because the 5s and the 6s are really stealing from each other in terms of outs, and you have one of the queens, which really reduces the opportunity for your opponent to have another queen, I would move forward in this hand. So let's go ahead and see what happens on 4th Street. Let's say that you are dealt a 3 with your hand, and let's say the person with a 5 was dealt an ace of diamonds and the 5 of diamonds, so now they've got 2 diamonds. Let's say that the 2 6s folded, and so now the queen is dealt a jack. So 4th Street is normally straightforward. You really shouldn't be folding unless someone paired their door card or their 3rd Street card. So in this particular situation, no one paired their door street card, so you can go ahead and move forward. The 3 didn't really help you at all, and you definitely got downgraded with the ace coming out, especially a suited ace, and you got downgraded with the jack coming out. So I wouldn't blame you if you folded, but normally the pot dictates that you can stay with it for one more street to 5th Street. So 4th Street is normally pretty straightforward, and you don't necessarily have to fold here, although you definitely got downgraded. 5th Street, though, is where the price of the bets go up. So you are no longer betting in $20 increments. You are now betting in $40 increments. And you really need to make some decisions on 5th Street about whether or not you're going to go forward or not in the hand. So in this particular example, you are now dealt a 7. The ace 5 4 is dealt with a 4 of diamonds, and the queen jack is dealt an ace. So on 5th Street, the decisions get more pricey, and you have been extremely downgraded in your hand, and it's really a fit or fold strategy on 5th Street. And in this particular scenario, you should fold. You're up against a possible pair of aces, you're up against a possible flush, you're up against a possible straight, and all you have is a pair of 10s. So you should cut your losses, and you should definitely not be proceeding in the hand. So also the thing that you need to pay attention to in 7-card stud is the person who leads in the pot with the betting action changes from street to street. So unlike the bring in, where the lowest card is going to have to put money in the pot first, the action is now starting on 4th Street and 5th Street is now on the person who has the best hand showing with exposed cards. So in this particular scenario, the ace queen jack has the best possible hand showing, and they would act first. They will likely bet, and if they do bet, when it gets to you, you should fold. If they check when it gets to you, you should check. But you should definitely not continue to put more money in this pot unless it checks around to you and you happen to hit a 3rd 10 or something like that on 6th Street. So what cards should you start playing with once you're dealt your 2 cards down and 1 card up? Again, it's very dependent on the board, but typically you want to play high pairs. So if you've got a pair of aces split, then you definitely should enter the pot. If you have a pair of aces wired, you should 100% enter the pot. And if you're rolled up, meaning 3 of the same card, so 3 6s, 3 8s, 3 10s, what have you, you should be raising as much as possible. Another good category of hands to play is three to the flush. Now, it's important that your three to the flush are high cards and not low cards. So let's say you had ace, jack, nine, all clubs. You should be playing that hand as opposed to deuce, seven, nine, all clubs. I wouldn't necessarily play that hand. But again, it depends on what cards are exposed. A good rule of thumb is if two of the suit you need are exposed, meaning they are the door cards of other individuals, then the hand is pretty much unplayable. So if you're playing seven-handed, you've got three clubs, but you see two or three clubs in other people's door cards, then you should fold because it's very unlikely you're going to make a flush. Additionally, let's say you have a straight card. So let's say you have 4, 5, 7. I really wouldn't play 4, 5, 7 either because now you have to hit a 6. And whether or not the cards are exposed or not, it's much more difficult to hit a 6 than it is to hit any club, right? So I wouldn't play lower straight cards when you're playing 7-card stud. But if you, let's say, had Broadway cards such as King, Queen, 10, well, that's a different story because you could also make a pair that is likely to win. Anytime you have a buried pair of cards that are higher than, I would say, 9s or 10s, you should definitely give it some thought. But again, pay attention to the up cards. And if you have split cards, sometimes they say jacks are better. Jacks are probably going to get you in trouble if you see other cards out there, because that means that someone playing with the queen or king or ace exposed has already got you beat. And let's say your jack is the highest card. Well, then what does that mean? If your jack is the highest card that's exposed, that means that people either have buried cards that are probably higher than yours. So they might have a pair of kings buried or a pair of queens buried, or there's a lot more high cards to come, which means that they are likely to pair their high cards later. So just because you have the highest card showing doesn't mean you have a good chance of winning. Because two pair is normally going to be the lower end of the winning range in 7-card stud. Normally just a pair is not going to hold up. It's normally going to be two pair. And that's where you don't want to be caught out there with a pair of 8s and a pair of 6s as your two pair, because you're going to lose all the time to a pair of aces and a pair of 4s, or kings up or jacks up or something like that. You're going to always lose when you have low two pair hands compared to other hands. So when you do have 3 to the flush and on 4th Street, you also get a suited card. So you had 3 clubs that you were dealt, and on 4th Street, you were dealt another club. It's important to know that you are actually a favorite at this point in time. You're more than a 50% favorite to win the hand by making your flush. And you should be trying to keep as much money in the hand as possible and raise it up as much as possible, because you are a statistical favorite to win the hand when you go from 3 to the flush to 4 to the flush on 4th Street. Another thing that people tend to overlook a little bit when they play stud is the side card. So what do I mean by the side card? So let's say you are dealt a pair of jacks and they're split, right? So you have a jack up and a jack in a hole, and your side card is the ace. That ace is extremely powerful because if you catch another ace, you are going to have aces up and be in a really powerful situation. As opposed to, let's say you had split jacks with a 3 in the hole. That 3 doesn't help you at all, and it's probably going to cost you the hand if you decide to move forward, because someone else will catch a higher 2 pair than you, and you really can't make a straight out of it or anything of the like. So your side card matters a lot. It is a big difference in equity between an ace as your side card and, let's say, a 3 or 4 or some other low card like that. So keep good side cards in your hand. Typically also, all 3 cards should work together, but not so much so in stud as opposed to, let's say, Raz or 7-card stud 8 or better. The reason being is that because in Raz, you need 3 cards that are all low to work together in order to win the pot. But in 7 card stud, if you just had a pair of, let's say, kings, and it'd be better if your side card was an ace or queen or a jack or something like that. You could still win the pot with a side card as a 9 if you caught a 9 later on, right? So you can still win the hand with not all 3 cards working together, but don't get used to playing that way. Really strive for all 3 of your cards to work together before you proceed on to 4th Street. We talked about 5th Street being very straightforward, and you should use a fit or fold strategy on 5th Street to determine whether or not you move forward in the hand as the price of poker has gone up. But another street that is very obvious is 7th Street. And the reason why it's pretty obvious on what you should do on 7th Street is because in most instances, the size of the pot is going to be too big compared to the bet you are faced with to fold. You are almost always going to have to call the bet on 7th Street unless you are absolutely, positively certain you are beat. And I'm going to give you an example of when you will know you are beat. So for instance, let's say you are playing against an opponent and they have a pair of 7s showing, okay? Not that strong of a hand, but they've got 2 7s in their 4 exposed cards. But let's say you don't beat a pair of 7s because you were on a straight draw or a flush draw and you missed. You probably shouldn't be in that scenario, but let's just say you were in that scenario and you got to 7th Street and you missed your flush draw or your straight draw. Well, you now lose. And the only way you're going to be able to win is to bluff and bet the river with maybe a raise or something like that. And that's really advanced 7-card stud, which we're not talking about here today, but we will create a video for that in the future. But as of right now, you can't beat the pair of 7s. And it's hard to bluff in limit poker where they're going to call your bet likely on the river if they have any chance of beating you whatsoever. So if someone checks to you, fine, check it and turn it over. But if you are facing a bet on the river on 7th Street and you can't beat their board, then that is when you fold. Other than that, if you have a chance of winning the hand because you can beat what they are showing, then you pretty much have to call the bet even if you know or think that you are beat. It's just the way it is, and you only have to be right a few times for it to be worth it mathematically. So that 7-card stud is pretty straightforward. It's a lot of fun. Do me a favor, get out of your comfort zone. Don't play Hold'em all the time. Switch it up a little bit. Play a horse tournament. Play a little 7-card stud cash game, and I think you'll have a lot of fun. If you enjoyed this video, check out my video on H.O.R.S.E, which you can also learn about how to play a stud format of lowball poker. That's a lot of fun as well. And we will see you next time on Year of the Wager. Thanks.